Welcome, everybody, to the Quest for Success podcast.
Thank you guys for tuning in to the first episode. We're really excited to just bring on an amazing guest, and we have a really great guest on the first podcast, is Mr. Tim Vanni. Tim Vanni is a two-time Olympian and has just many accolades at the world and national stage in wrestling.
Tim is still in the game here as an educator in Porterville, California. He is also the head coach for the Porterville Wrestling program.
We had an amazing conversation with Tim today, and we hope you guys listen and tune in, and hope you guys can bring some value from it as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Tim Vanni to the Quest for Success podcast. All right, everyone, welcome to the Quest for Success podcast. We're really excited to have Mr. Tim Vanni on today, so thank you for being on the show today, Tim.
You're quite welcome. Good to be here.
Yeah, so on the Quest for Success podcast, we have a little segment called the Mental Minute, just some questions, kind of get fired up. You know, anything you do, whether it's in wrestling, whether it's in swimming or working out, you got to get warmed up physically and mentally, and on this podcast, so we're going to try to get warmed up mentally a little bit. So the first question is, what was the most embarrassing moment you've ever had as a coach or wrestling?
Ooh. Most embarrassing. Well, as a wrestler, I don't know that I was ever embarrassed. I mean, obviously losing is kind of embarrassing itself. Right. But as far as seeing athletes, you know, drinking grape juice and you know, not having a clean singlet, you know, that's probably the most embarrassing for some kids that I've seen.
Yeah,
and it happens.
Okay. The next question would be, what would you say is the most memorable moment of your wrestling career?
That's a long time ago.
It's a long time ago.
Yeah, it certainly would take some thought because like I said, I tried to preview some of these, but I think making the Olympic team the first time.
Yeah.
And you know, we were in Pensacola, Florida, and I was wrestling Richie Salamone, who was been a long time nemesis of mine, and we went back and forth many times, and I think I beat him probably 8 times, and he's beaten me 6 times.
Sure.
And those 2 matches in Pensacola, Florida, we had previously wrestled 3 weeks before in what was transition normally nationals to Olympic trials. Well, they had a pre-Olympic trials meet about 3 weeks before in the middle of Topeka, Kansas, and nobody knew why we were in Topeka, which there's not a lot of wrestling in Topeka. But anyway, I beat Rich 13-11 at that meet, and because he armed through me like 3 times, and you know, that's embarrassing, almost getting beat, but. I won that match, and so I went into the final trials as number 1, and I beat him. I pinned him. I was beating him 10-0 the first match, and pinned him, and then I beat him 11-1. And the point he scored was like the last 10 seconds where I just bellied out.
The last question, Tim, or did you want to jump in real quick?
No, I just think it's pretty. I always think these things are kind of remarkable for athletes that done what you've done, how they remember everything to the detail.
Yeah.
And especially like you said, it's been so long, but yet you know scores, you know everything.
You know, emotionally, you know, it's like I want to dominate, and I think every athlete wants to dominate their sport, especially when they're trying to make an Olympic team, and this is the final trials, and either you win or you go home,
right?
Or if you win, you go to Seoul. And so, you know, part of my preparation for that, because he did arm throw me, right. I shaved my arms. I shaved my arms, and I thought, well, he's going to slip off. You know, just mentally, I think just that little bit of extra edge, he was not able to score on me.
I mean, that's the life of a competitor. You're always trying to get the extra edge. Yes. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, you know, all the little fine points and the little details is what really matters. You know, I think mentally is.
Yeah, and at that level, right? Because everybody's so close in as far as physical capabilities, and obviously they got the mental toughness if they're there, right? So every little detail matters.
It does,
yeah,
and you know, and people are finding out nowadays that nutrition is starting to be a huge factor in NC2A level and Olympic level as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Tim, there's always, I guess, maybe some defining moments when we kind of find our calling. What was that moment for you where you realized like wrestling, or maybe it was coaching for you, whatever, but what was that defining moment you realized like this is what I'm going to do? Like this is my calling.
As far as a sport?
Yeah.
Well, like Zach, I was a baseball player growing up, and I played all the way until I was 15, Babe Ruth, and my brother was in the Marine Corps, and my other brother, who's 18 months older than me, he was going to go stay with him in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune, and I thought, I want to go travel. I want to do that. I want to get out of Porterville and see some other things, and I think the travel bug was part of that, and so we were in the middle of All-Star playoffs, and I quit baseball. That was the last time I ever played, and then I went to North Carolina for the summer, and pretty much started wrestling. And the other factor was too, I had went to state that year, my sophomore year, and so it was kind of, the off season of wrestling. There's freestyle all through the summer months, and trying to balance baseball and wrestling, and I just went to state, and I think I realized that I could probably go farther in wrestling than I could in baseball.
Yeah.
At 5'1", I'm 5'1" now. I was probably, who knows what I was, how tall I was at that time. But anyway, I just didn't see a future in baseball for me. Because if I want to do it, I want to play in the major leagues. I want to be one of the best, and I didn't see that in baseball for myself. I saw it in wrestling because wrestling is a weight class sport, 105.5 international all the way to heavyweights, and so everybody's got a place in there where you're competing against somebody your own size, and I think that's what initially did it for me, was my sophomore year, end of my sophomore year.
Nice. Right. So let's go. I kind of want to jump in, and thanks for answering those questions, kind of get us mentally into this conversation today. And where did it all kind of start for you? Like your childhood growing up, like where did you grow up, and what was that kind of dynamic, your childhood, where did your parents kind of put you in sports early?
That's a pretty good story in itself. My parents divorced probably right after I was born.
Wow.
My mother had 4 of us by the time she was 20. She was 20 when she had me, and I was the 4th one. So obviously she got pregnant young. My father, left the marriage, and then since has remarried, and so my mom essentially raised 4 kids on her own with the help of my grandparents, who got out of L.A. area, came up to Woodville initially, and then my mom came up, and we got a house over on the east side. Went to Alta Vista, kindergarten, first grade, before going to Burton, where Maples Academy is now.
Yeah.
Right.
That was the junior high. So I went through Burton, and then we moved to the west side when my mom remarried, and that probably lasted about 5 or 6 years. So it was essentially my grandparents that lived in Springville. They moved from Woodville to Springville, and my mom worked as a psych tech out at the state hospital for 36 years.
How old were you when you guys made that move to here? Really young, right?
I was probably 2.
Okay.
I know I had valley fever, and I was diagnosed in Visalia. I ended up 2 months in the Springville hospital, the place up there that used to be a hospital.
Right.
And I was 2 months in there with valley fever, and I got out on my 4th birthday.
Wow.
Oh, no kidding.
Wow. That means.
So do any of those complications come up today? Valley fever?
No.
Stuff like that? Breathing? Nothing? Wow. Okay.
No, totally cured, I guess.
I mean, so, being a wrestler, you got to have that mentality, and kind of growing up, it sounds like, parents divorced, you had some valley fever growing up. So right away it was kind of,
some
adversity. A battle, some adversity.
Well, and I don't think as a kid you realize mentally, the impact of all those things. And looking back on it, I certainly don't remember anything other than the animosity of not really liking my father at the time because he kind of ran out. And, other kids have father figures and they're doing stuff with their kids. And you see that. And I think growing up as a young child, and then obviously when you get into your teen years, it probably has more of an impact that, dad's not around.
Right. So earlier you kind of talked about why you chose wrestling over baseball. Who got you into wrestling, and at what age did you start to wrestling?
Well, my brother Danny and I,
okay,
he's 18 months older than I.
Okay.
So we used to fight. I mean,
physically
fight
okay.
all the time. I mean,
lace them up.
From 6 years old, all the way, probably until we got into our, latter years of high school, and we found wrestling. But my oldest brother, Vince, started as a freshman for Drew Williams at Monache.
Okay.
He went to the first state meet in 73 and went to the second state meet in 74, so he qualified for state those last 2 years of high school before getting his girlfriend pregnant and going to the Marines, and then we go to North Carolina. But Danny and I used to just beat each other up all the time. And so Vince would come home from wrestling practice when he first got into high school, and I think we were 5th or 6th grade. And he would just torture us. He would come and do his new moves on us, and his favorite move, he became a legger, and which is leg riding, and would torture us with the move called the guillotine, and drool in our face, and we were all split out. We couldn't do anything, and we'd just yell, "Mom, come and help us, save us," and so that went on for a couple of years, and then
right.
Drew Williams started the PAW program, which was Porterville Amateur Wrestling, which was a kids club basically, and so we got involved in that when I was in 7th grade, and it just kind of progressed from there.
So in today, the way that sports, I mean, man, kids start like at 6, like. Dad, Mom, you're doing it at 6, and we're taking it all the way to the top. You didn't start till 7th grade.
7th grade, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I started baseball when, I guess wasn't T-ball then. It was kind of a pre-Little League team. Knot hole, that's what it was. Knot hole, and then Little League, and then Babe Ruth.
Right. But wrestling, though, didn't start till 7th grade.
Wrestling started 7th grade.
Okay.
That's kind of crazy because I know, I had a conversation with Joe Soto, and I don't think he started wrestling until he was in 7th grade at Bartlett or something.
Yeah,
too.
I went and watched him. I think they had a tournament at Bartlett, and I went down there, because people were telling me about this young kid, and he wasn't very good at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But by the end of the season, you could see the improvement that he had made from the beginning to the end. And I said, "Oh, man, that guy's going to be something special." So.
Yeah. So you talk about your brother because you were the youngest one.
Yes.
Right. And if you watch, especially sports, like you look at the Diaz brothers or whoever, usually the youngest one ends up being the toughest because they had to deal with all those older brothers beating them up all the time.
Well, and I think, that's a tribute to my older brothers, and because you learn things, not so much through their success as well as their failures. My oldest brother Vince was in shop classes. So what did we do? We went into shop classes, did the woodworking, did the welding and all that stuff. And you kind of follow the same paths. Why? Because somebody's already blazed a trail for you.
Sure.
And so in that sense, it's very helpful. But at some point, you're going to find that you're going to need to go your own way. And I didn't do that until my senior year.
Got it. So, Tim, I want to kind of talk about that transition. So, what was that transition like from, having a relatively successful high school career, maybe not exactly what you wanted, but, so ending your high school career and then going to the next level, was that something you knew, I'm going to go wrestle at the next level? So how did that process and transition work out for you?
Well, my junior year, I was 33-0, going into maybe I was 32-0 going into the state championships. And I ended up losing in the semifinals on a 1-1 criteria. I ended up that year, I was 36-0 going into the semifinals at state. Well, I lost 3 matches in a row on that Saturday, so I ended up in 6th place. And ultimately, I wanted to have an undefeated season.
Right.
But the transition, really came about when I was in Drew Williams' sports literature class, and I read the Dan Gable book. So, you said we're going to talk about Dan Gable. I'll bring it up right now. Dan Gable, I read his book, and it was basically his childhood, how his sister got murdered and that process. And I think it was maybe that time during my junior year that I said, I got to get out of all these shop classes. I'm going to go to college. And that's where I kind of started planning for college. So my senior year, I got out of all the shop classes, and I took English honors with Shirley Hickman, who's well known in town. And without her, she saved my college career because, all the writing, we did a lot of writing. And, I took algebra and I took some other science and some other, higher profile classes so I can get into college. And then Bob Smith, who was a counselor at Monache at that time, signed me up for a Pell Grant. I don't know any of that stuff. I don't know what it was.
Right.
So basically it paid my college tuition the first year. So that kind of got me going. And so when I got the Pell Grant, it really, took some of the cost out of going to college. And because my senior year, I was preparing to go to college. I knew at that time when I was a senior that I'm going to go to college. Whether I wrestle or not, I'm going to make the Olympic team at some point. Wow. And then at the same time when I was reading that book in sports literature class, in Drew Williams' class, I was thinking, Dan Gable, man, he'll probably be old and dead by the time I, get up there. But, all the same, that's when I kind of set the goal to make the Olympic team.
Right. So where did you go to college?
I went to Cal State Bakersfield.
And did you ended up wrestling at
Sorta.
Cal State Bakersfield, kinda?
Sorta. That's a story in itself because, I was a 98 pounder in high school. Uh-huh. That's back when they had 98. Now the lowest weight class is 106. Dick Francis from Fresno State came down. My mom and I sat down with him, and he wanted me to go to Fresno State. But at the time, Fresno State was kind of in a rebuilding process, and they didn't really have much of a program. And I had heard some things about Von Hitchcock over at Cal Poly, and I didn't really want to go there. My brother Danny and I had went to Joe C's camp, who was coaching at Cal State Bakersfield at the time. We had went to Aptos and went to their wrestling camp, and we saw Dave Schultz there, and when he was in junior high. Well, no, he was a senior in high school, I think, at that time. He's a year and a half older than I am. But, and we saw the Bakersfield Express, which was their freestyle club, and they had just won the national tournament. They beat every team in the country, primarily from guys all over the nation, but they had ties to Bakersfield and they had ties to Joe C. And I thought, I'm gonna make the Olympic team. And I'm going to go here and I'll wrestle for Bakersfield Express. And nice. At the time, Cal State Bakersfield was probably the best fit for me because they did have their Bakersfield Express. They had John Esvito and Joe Gonzalez, who had just finished second in the NC2As, and they had an outstanding program. They've won the Division IIs probably 5 times by then, and then I think 7 by the time I was done, or 8. So as far as national powerhouses, and they had a room. Of course, it wasn't any bigger than this room at all, and this whole room, and it was a tiny room, and people just wrestled.
They made it work.
Yeah.
In my profession, what I do, right? I'm a personal trainer. This field is constantly growing. Some sports science.
Yes.
Right. And now telling us that you started wrestling at 7. High school, and then college, the Olympics, so on and so forth, up until now you are a coach at Porterville High.
Yes.
How much has the sport evolved?
Ooh. Well, that's a lot of history there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're going back to my pre-college days when, guys were trying to make the Olympic team, and there's guys out there that only wrestle every 4 years, no matter how old they are,
Right.
because they want a shot. They're going to go to the Olympic trials and try to make an Olympic team. And every 4 years, there's these new guys that come in that you haven't seen for 3 years, and all of a sudden they're trying to make the Olympic team. Then you won't see them for 3 more years after the trials, and they come back and in the next Olympiad and trials and try to make a team. But those guys didn't get paid, and we didn't get paid either until after '88. Where we had a stipend that was able to go into a trust fund for us to use for training expenses. So we had a huge advantage. And now, 2020 Olympics, basically 2021 Olympics that just went past, and they did an outstanding job. But, they're getting a lot of money. I mean, a lot of it's donated to them. It's not like some of it's on a pay scale, I should say. But it's not hard to probably make $100,000 in wrestling. And if you get a medal, that's going to be
bonuses and whatnot.
That's going to be, I mean, you look at Gable Stevenson from the University of Minnesota. He kind of held out, and he just won his second NCAA title as a heavyweight. $10 million from WWE.
Yeah.
So he's going WWE, and good for him. I mean, it's great. It's great for the sport. It's great, that wrestlers. There's not a real professional level, but it's getting as professional as it can get as far as an amateur sport. So kudos to those guys that have really grown the sport. And we kind of started that in '88 with John DuPont and some of the East Coast money. And it kind of started before that, really, with Art Martori. And I've got to give Art Martori his due, because Art's a whole nother figure that Dave Schultz used to describe Art's money as new money and John DuPont's money as old money. Mm-hmm. And John inherited all his money, and Art made all his money. So Art Martori basically started the Sunkissed Kids, which was the club that I wrestled for throughout my career.
Oh, so you mentioned John DuPont and Dave Schultz. What was your kind of interaction with them at the time? Were you wrestling with any of those guys back then? Like,
oh yeah,
because everyone knows the story, the Foxcatcher movie, but the actual real story of the Schultz brothers and stuff.
Yeah, the Foxcatcher movie is not that accurate as far as the timeline and the real history of it. It's not that accurate. If you look at the Prince of Pennsylvania. It's a documentary that was done by
ESPN. Did that one, or because there was like a series, there was like another series that ESPN did, I think, on it too.
There's a 30 for 30.
That's what it is. Yeah,
and I think it incorporated a lot of that John Greenhall did. And Sonny Greenhall used to be the head coach at New York Athletic Club. Well, his son John is a filmmaker as well, and he's the one that did the Prince of Pennsylvania, the documentary, and did the 30 for 30 thing, I believe, and kind of brought all that together as far as the correct timeline and the actual history of it, and brought in people that were living at Foxcatcher at that time, which was, it's a 1,200-acre property that was, they grew corn, and there was like 40 houses on this property, some for the people that were doing the corn and living there, and then John's bachelor pad, and then the mansion, the DuPont mansion, and then Dave had a house on the other side, and then there was a kind of a one training site and a house that 6 guys lived in, and then people would come in and train now and then and stay there, and they built the wrestling room up, and that was pretty phenomenal too. So it became a USA wrestling training site, mostly before we went from, I'm here in Arizona at the time, or California. We would fly to DuPont's place and train for a few days and then go to Europe for tournaments.
Yeah. So you did have, how much time did you spend there at DuPont? Because you kind of went back and forth, you said.
I was there in numerous training camps, winter and summer, mostly summer, from 87, before they actually built the main facility,
Yeah.
where they had one wrestling mat. I think that was the first time in 87 when Dave was, no, actually Mark was there first. Mark was there, had just gotten recruited. A guy named Rob Calabrese was the first team fox catcher guy, because his dad poured concrete. It was a big concrete guy, and Rob went to the same Catholic school that John DuPont did, and he became the first true fox catcher. And then,
Yeah.
one guy's picture on the wall, team fox catcher. Okay, and then pretty soon, by the end of that, you've got a whole line of, individuals that represent team fox catcher.
Well, that's it's interesting to hear. Was he as odd as like some of the documentary and movies make him out to be, DuPont?
He was an extremely eccentric individual. He's the kind of guy that you see him walking down the street, you kind of want to turn and go the other way.
You don't want to get caught in a conversation or something
Yeah,
with him.
he was just odd.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Well, I got to ask, before, I want to know about your training. I want to discuss, because you before you mentioned the nutrition, that's different nowadays, that type of thing. But I want to know about your training, progressing up to be an Olympian, from high school to college to the Olympic level. I mean, how did it progress, and what changed throughout that, time frame, that time period?
Well, I think as an athlete, you continually glean from other people that are successful.
Absolutely.
And you're always, whether you're stealing it or you're just saying, hey, I like that aspect of your training, I think I'll incorporate it in mine.
Absolutely.
So everything, particularly in wrestling, and I'm sure it's that way with other sports, that you've got to make it your own. And so there's different aspects of training, whether you're running or swimming, for cardio, different types of things that you're doing that are more effective for you.
Absolutely.
Nutrition, that kind of progresses as well. And you have segments, I think, in your competitive life that you continue to learn things that will help you.
Absolutely.
And as you grow older and wiser and have more experience, whether, and you continue competing, you find out what works best for you on every level, whether, it's wrestling, running, lifting, nutrition, and you try to kind of refine that. So it's kind of like an upside down pyramid where, not an upside down pyramid, but it's kind of a pyramid effect where you're trying to get to the tip of the spear,
peak,
per se, and peak on those levels. So all this stuff down on below, it might be when you begin, and as you start climbing that pyramid and getting better and better, you're refining your training, you're refining your nutrition, you're doing mindset stuff, and mentally you're watching video, you're doing different things that make you a better athlete.
You're mastering your craft.
Yes.
That's exactly what. Yeah. Did you lift weights or do anything, so to
Yes.
say, push up? Like, what was it like?
Yes. Yes.
Was it your regimen, or did you find somebody else to help you in that aspect?
The first guy that helped me was Lonnie Gwynn, who was an assistant coach at Monachi at that time, because when I was a senior, I weighed 112, and I wanted to go back down to 98s.
Oh, wow.
And Drew Williams had this diet that was the U.S. ski team diet, a diet that we still use today. I modified it. There's a separate version that's called the Eddie Ramos diet.
Okay.
Eddie Ramos won the state championships in '93. He was my first state champion, and I had to modify that because it's extreme.
It's intense.
I mean, it's pretty. The idea of shrinking the stomach down, some kids just can't do that well enough. So we modified it for Eddie Ramos and gave a few more choices as far as what his diet would consist of and how he had to follow that plan. So in that respect, you're constantly modifying little things. But Lonnie Gwynn was the first person that helped me with my diet. And I would go down to Pizza Hut, that's next to Roscoe Mountain Tire. Right. It used to be a Pizza Hut back in the day.
Yeah.
And I'd go to that salad bar every day at lunch and have a salad and an iced tea during the season. Every day during the season, my senior year. And, eventually I got down to 98s and I made weight. And, I held it down and stayed consistent through the season, which is not always easy to do when you have a duel on Wednesday and then you have a tournament on Saturday. So you're constantly in that. It's not a starvation effect, but it's minimal eating, and you're shrinking the stomach down where you become a grazer, where you have something for breakfast and then a little snack like at a brunch, and then you might have a decent-sized lunch because your main workout's coming up in the afternoon, and then a smaller dinner, and maybe you're running at night even. Different types of things to kind of continue to burn the weight.
What's your philosophy, Tim, on like dehydrating yourself? Because you see in wrestling, I mean, a lot of guys, maybe they don't do what they need to do to cut weight, so they ended up dehydrating themselves, right up to the match or the duel tournament, whatever it is. And we see this in MMA a lot, and we see guys have really, really tough weight cuts, and they're just depleting themselves before, and that has long-lasting effects on some of these guys that they're starting to find out now.
It certainly does, and dehydration is part of it, but I think more about rehydration, which depending on, obviously MMA, they do a day before weigh-in.
Yeah.
So they got plenty of time.
Sure.
It's not, but when you got 2 hours before you compete, that's a whole different story. And you've got to be, you were saying a real master of your craft. You have to be a real master at your diet. And for young kids, you can tell them, you can go to their house and show them, but ultimately they're going to learn by trial and error, and they're going to make mistakes. Not that they would ever miss weight. Some have. I've never missed weight in my life, but they're going to make mistakes, and they just have to find what works for them as far as dehydrating, shrinking that stomach down. And the first 5 or 6 days is brutal, because and there's still kids in high school that starve themselves all week and then they try to compete. They're a rag doll. Not effective at all. You have to eat. We used to spit in cups in high school and eat, 3 packs of juicy fruit gum and spit in cups and lose a half a pound. Ooh. So, if you went out and ran a couple of miles, you could lose it pretty easy.
Throw a trash bag or something on.
Yeah. Well, plastics and all that stuff's outlawed now in wrestling, but that was a big part of our training.
Yeah.
There's guys a little heavier than me, but, that were over 10 or 12 pounds day before, and, they kind of crash diet, and it's not always that effective, but when you train your body to endure those types of things, it can be done. And it's not the ideal way to do it, but it can be done because you have this, your body forms these habits where, you may be able to lose, a couple of pounds an hour. And the whole point is, as far as dieting and dehydration, yes, we used a lot of plastics back in the day. And we would put our sweatshirts on over them and, thermals underneath and then plastics. And I never liked the plastics against my skin because, you could feel it. And so I always wore like thermals or tights underneath. And same with the top. And then I'd put the plastics on, then I'd put the sweatshirts on. And the real key is no more than an hour. Because, in the late 90s and early 2000s, there's kids that are dying from dehydration because they don't know how to cut weight or their coach is pushing them too much. And I've pushed some kids pretty hard to the point of collapse, after they get off the scale. So I've seen it. I've had actual experience with it. but it's not the way to do it. If you're not training your body to be able to endure what you're doing, if it's the first time you go out there and you're running in plastics for an hour, you may die. You may dehydrate and die. Yeah. And there's been a couple of cases at the national level that kids have died from dehydration. That's why they've outlawed these plastics or even trash bags. That's illegal. But you got to train your body. So the first point of that is your diet. If you're not dieting right, it's going to be very hard to lose the weight you need. And the dehydration is kind of the last resort, maybe 12 hours before. If you're competing with a 2-hour window, if it's the night before, you shouldn't have a problem. You shouldn't have a problem of dehydrating for an hour and then getting on a scale and then, making the weight and ultimately being ready to compete.
Right. I want to kind of go back and talk about, that being selected for, Team USA, the national team. What was that process like, and what was that feeling like? Did you get a phone call? Like, how did you kind of find out? And
well, in wrestling, it's all competition. I mean, you win or you go home. Yeah. And, when I was in Pensacola, Florida, and I beat Richie Solomon those last 2 matches, I got on top of the podium. I'm the guy that's going to the Olympics because I just took first place at the Olympic trials. And it's not like you get a call. I mean, some sports they may do that and say, okay, but it's all competition. Yeah. So
you had to qualify for the trials themselves. Is that how it worked, or
you qualify for the trials in a number of ways. One, you place in the top 6 of nationals, and then they have I think 6 regional tournaments around the country, and you place in the top 3 of those. You're qualified for the final Olympic trials, and then they had that little pre-meet in Topeka, which narrowed the field to I think top 8. So that's all it was. But if you're on the top, you only have to wrestle one guy. Whoever, 4 through 8 wrestle a mini tournament, and they determine who the number 3 guy is. And then the number 3 guy wrestles number 2 guy 2 out of 3, and number 2 guy wrestles number 1 guy 2 out of 3.
Okay.
So, in 92 when I made the team, I lost my first match to Rob Eider, who was my training partner. You talk about lifting weights. Rob was kind of my training partner when I first got to Arizona State. I think he was a sophomore at the time. But basically, every day, Rob would go lift with me. Rob would go drill with me. We would work out together every day. We did that for about 5 years. And in 92, he was in the same weight class. He beat me the first match. So I had to come back and win 2 in a row to make the team.
And this was for your first?
This is the 92 second team.
Obviously you're pretty familiar with winning, right? But even, maybe not. That's why I'm asking you. But, did you ever deal with butterflies? Like getting all nervous before a match or something like that? But how did you cope with it?
I think everybody has butterflies.
It means it's real,
It's real, and your anxiety level goes up, and it's a mix of anxiety and having those butterfly feelings where you feel weak. You go out there, the whistle blows, and you can't really do a whole lot. And a lot of that is because you got too much anxiety. You're too nervous. So I think mentally, again, through this process of growing and trying to figure out what's the best way for me to compete mentally, and it's different for a lot of people.
Sure.
So whether you go out and you run a mile before, 30 minutes before you wrestle, or you're doing some live drilling, or you're sparring a little bit live. And for me, it was just simply, I could do all that, all the warm-ups and stretch and make sure my body is ready. But mentally, probably the last 10 or 15 minutes before I was to go out on the mat. And I pretty much knew when I was going out on the mat, because whether it's a duel in Russia or the Olympic trials or anything, it's not going to start until after the national anthem. There's very few times that I was not the first guy up. So I kind of had that timing down where, 15 minutes before the national anthem, I was just kind of meditate. I'd go sit down, get off my feet, save my legs, close my eyes, focus, just do a mental process of seeing myself winning and some visualization where I was relaxed, and I could, I have all the adrenaline still because it's still pumping through you, and that's basically what the nerves and butterflies are. It's basically adrenaline, so you got to tell yourself to channel that into a kind of, it's almost like holding back a dragster, Okay, you're revving up the engine, and then you let it go. So mentally, I think trying to relax before that all happened, right before the national anthem, and knowing that I was the first guy going out there, whether I was wrestling the World Cup against a Russian or any competition that, first match of the World Championships or the Olympics or, the last match. It's kind of all the same. And I think through years of experience, you kind of, you get to that top of the pyramid and you have a routine down that's going to help you.
The calm before the storm.
Yes.
Yeah. Speaking of like big moments and butterflies, I mean, what was the atmosphere like of, going to your first Olympics? I've listened to Jordan Burroughs and a couple of people talk about kind of the moment and being there. And obviously things changed over the years, but what was that moment like for you being at the Olympics for the first time?
Well, in '88, I was extremely excited because, everything was new to me. I had made it. And, even in opening ceremonies, we didn't really get to watch the opening ceremonies. They kind of kept us outside for part of that and lined up and ready to march into the stadium. And I just remember Chris Everett Lloyd was next to us, and she was playing tennis, and I'm kind of like, why is she here?
Yeah.
She's a pro. But, they had a lot of those types of things. But it was exciting because everything was new and everything you did was the first time. And I remember a moment when I was sitting in the chow hall, because it's open 23 hours a day and it's a big cafeteria environment. And I'm looking around at all these people and I'm going, wow, there's 12,000 athletes here and I'm one of them. It's kind of an awe-dropping moment that you've attained that level, and then to go out and compete when you're, obviously in your venue and the auditorium, it's extremely exciting. So all that training I did to get to the top of the pyramid mentally, you have to make some adjustments. And I think every competition, whether it's the Olympics or the national finals or whatever, you have to make some adjustments, and maybe there's some concessions in there that you need to adapt to.
Exactly, adapt. So, perfect word.
Yeah,
you got to be able to adapt.
Yes, and the hard part is doing it on the fly.
Yeah.
When something unexpected comes up, whether they come to you and you're all prepared, ready to go out there first, and they say, we're going to change the order of the weight classes, and John Smith's going last, and you're going fifth, or whatever it might be. So you've got to be prepared for that. And I think mentally, if you've trained your mind to do that as a competitor, you're going to be more comfortable with it, and it's not going to shake you up or adjust your real focus towards competing.
So I guess what was that transition like? Obviously, your first Olympics, exciting. And you end up going to another one. But in between, I guess, the Olympics, you were competing on the national and world level. So I guess what was that transition from finishing up the first Olympics, kind of what did you learn from there, and eventually, getting to your second Olympics?
Number one, I realized how much it meant. The Olympic Games. It only comes every 4 years. And with the delay this last year and people that were ready in 2020, like you say, Jordan Burroughs, he might have made the team in 2020.
Yeah.
But 2021, a year later, he gets beat, so he doesn't make the team. So timing is crucial in sports. I mean, you have to be prepared at that moment. If this tournament comes up in February, you got to be prepared in February. If this tournament comes up in July, you got to be prepared in July. So there's a lot of timing that goes on within your training and trying to incorporate all these things we're talking about, whether it's nutrition and your lifting and your focus, your mindset, that it all goes into the calendar, you know. And if something doesn't happen at the time it's supposed to happen, or you're not prepared for it, it's not going to come back again. They're not waiting for you.
Right.
It's gone. Okay, so you lose opportunities. After 88, you know, I'm not so sure what I'd learned. I learned the moment of the Olympics and how big it was.
The experience of it.
And the experience of it. And, you know, I finished fourth. I lost to Sergei Kampchakov from Russia, 3-1 for the bronze medal. And I think I started preparing then for the World Cup. And the World Cup is in April in Toledo, Ohio, and I was going to wrestle Sergei again. So I think I ended up beating him 5-2, 5 months after the Olympics, you know. So
what changed?
You know, I think ultimately, and I've thought about this before a few times, way back when I wrestled Junior Worlds, I beat my first Russian. And, I mean, you've got to have such a mindset that you want to win badly. I mean, it's even more than that. You know, failure doesn't become an option. I think at some point that you reach this level of intensity and this focus that you know you're going to be prepared for the moment, and you're going to excel in that moment. And I think it's a very difficult thing to explain.
Yeah.
That you know,
People think you'd crazy if you did try to explain it to them.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, it could be. You know, I remember when I beat my first Russian, and even more so, I ran in the 82 World Championships. I wrestled Iran. Balzagar, who was third in the world at the time, and they had the hostage crisis back in 80, 81, 82, and we were in Edmonton, Canada, and just convincing yourself you're not going to lose. And I wrestled Balzagar at the World Championships in 82 in Edmonton, Canada, and first round he's beating me 6-0. And back then it was, I think we had 2 3-minute rounds. And I came back and beat him 15-11 or 15-13.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
And, you know, they had a big write-up in Sports Illustrated and stuff. And it was the eye of the hurricane. But it was, I mean, it was intense. And I told myself, I am not going to lose to an Iranian. You know, just because I think the political environment and the situation that was going on.
Absolutely.
And
you put pressure on yourself, though. You know,
yes.
Not a lot of people like putting pressure at all, you know?
Well, it's I think a lot of people have external pressure put on them, especially if you've been at the top and trying to stay at the top.
Absolutely.
You're expected to do certain things. And that's what we talked about initially, the underdog situation. You got nothing to lose. Go out there and throw the kitchen sink at them. You know, try all these goofy moves or whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. You're supposed to lose, right?
Absolutely.
You're supposed to lose.
Yeah.
But that guy that's the national champion or Olympic champion or whatever he may be, whatever accolades he has, he's supposed to win.
Right.
So that creates pressure.
Right.
Self-pressure, what I do, and encouraging myself, saying I'm not going to lose to an Iranian, I think is something that's innately internal for an athlete. And I think if you could stay at that level all the time, you win countless championships and you'd be number one for a long time. But, and that's part of trying to stay on top is you got to do a lot more than the other guys are doing.
Right.
And I've had lots of lessons like that. I've seen people do different things. One example was, I think in '83 we were at the NC2As at Iowa, and Mike Land from Iowa State, defending national champion, lost to a freshman, maybe it was '82, lost to freshman Darrell Burley from Lehigh. And, tournament's over, everybody's going about the banquets, and we're doing whatever we're doing. We're going out to the dinner, and we're going up the elevator. Here's Mike Land running up the stairs, coming down in the elevator, running up the stairs. He's got all the sweats on. He's just, and this is after the tournament's over.
Clockwork.
This is after the tournament's over. You lost already. But I think to try to not so much accept the loss, but to say, hey, that's not going to happen to me again.
Right.
Yeah.
You find ways to motivate yourself, and
Internalize.
and
like
it was
that.
it was certainly and I had another experience with that too in '84 when we were in Tbilisi tournament, and Dave Schultz was coaching at Stanford. John Azevedo had just gotten the job at Calvary Chapel down south in Anaheim, and I was still at Cal State Bakersfield. So we're three West Coast guys, and we flew in to Paris. Well, the rest of the U.S. team got a connecting flight to New York. We had to spend the night in Paris and fly to L.A. the next morning. Well, the next morning, Dave Schultz said, hey, let's go running. So I said, all right, we'll go running. So we go up and down the 8 floors of the hotel, and we're running up and down. And finally I go, hey, Dave, how many of these are we going to do? And he's like, till we get tired.
You're like, you're not tired yet?
I didn't say anything. I just kept going with him, but just that kind of mentality to push yourself beyond what you think you're capable of doing, because the body, the physical body, the mind is pretty weak compared to the body.
Right.
Mm-hmm. The mind's going to say, oh, I'm tired, way before the body. The body's, it's a magnificent, God creation that the body is going to go beyond the exhaustion point, beyond anything you think it's capable of doing. If you're in a life-threatening situation, you get in a car accident or whatever it might be, you fall off a cliff and break the leg. Look at the guy in Utah that, he cut his own arm off?
127 hours, is that what it was?
Yeah, he cut his own arm off.
Yeah, it's a live or die situation.
Yes. Yep. So, those types of things that people don't really internalize and realize that what the body is capable of doing. The mind was like, I got a little hesitant cut, but I'm going to die if I don't. So
fight or flight.
Yeah. So it's certainly those kinds of things that are going to ascend you to the top.
Tim, I have a question before we move on from any of the Olympic stuff. What did it mean to wrestle for the United States? What did it mean to be and represent the United States? And
growing up, I'm Italian, so I always used to say I'm an Italian American.
Yeah.
It's kind of like everybody's, Mexican American, Italian American, African American, whatever. So I kind of claim that I was an Italian American, but I have deep patriotic feelings for this country and what it has done for us. And I've kind of seen it firsthand, being able to travel around the world, in different places and seeing other cultures. The first time I went to Russia was 1982. I had a bum knee. I didn't tell them I had a bum knee, but I went anyway because they called and said, hey, you want to go to Tbilisi? And I said, yes. I didn't even hesitate. I wanted to go, and I just taped my knee up a whole bunch, and I got my ass kicked. I can say that on the podcast. Yeah. I got my ass kicked. Okay. I went 0-5. We were there for 3 weeks. We wrestled 3 different duels in Tbilisi tournament. And it was Russia. You know, everything was gray, and it was extremely communist country. People were fearful. And you know, they would always say KGB, you know, do they have people spying on us, people following us around? I mean, it wasn't, you could feel the lack of freedom.
Right.
I mean, you can feel it wherever you went. And even in the people you saw, you know, they propaganda. We have 100% employment in Russia. Everybody's got a job. Well, you know, they don't tell you about the little gal with a stick and some twigs at the end that is sweeping the sidewalk. That's right. Their job. Or the lady on your, you know, every floor of the hotel, they have a desk, and their job is you turn your key into them, and then when you come back, you pick your key up from them. You know, it's not a real job. You know, it's not like you're doing something or you have a skill or a craft or, but they claim that was 100% employment. And our last duel was in Moscow, so the Marines came, and it was awesome because they were up there in the stands, and this is where they had the 80 Olympics. So they were up in the stands, and they had the American flag, and then they picked us all up, the whole team. We went to the embassy, and like I say, it was 3 weeks, and it was just brutal of eating, you know, cabbage soup all the time, and chai. Chai was the best thing they had there, tea, hot tea. And they did have Pepsi there, you know, Nixon. But so we'd go to the embassy, and they said, hey, and you know, you can't call anybody. There's nobody you can call. There's no phones. There's nothing there. And in fact, the first day we were there, or actually, I think after the first week, I was with Joe Gonzalez, and we had just gotten to Moscow. And I said, hey, where are we going to do our laundry? You know, is there a laundromat somewhere? He's like, there's no laundromats in Russia. You can't, you know. So we're in the sink, and pretty soon you learn how to travel. You know, you carry your rope, and you hook it from the door hinge to the window hinge, and you're doing your laundry, and you put it on the old cast iron heaters that take about 3 days to dry. And, you know, you bring a suitcase of food, and, you know, but the first time it was pretty rough. And so we went to the American Embassy, and we got to watch the Super Bowl and have these little pizzas, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
And coming out of Russia, we landed in Paris, and it was like, oh my God, I want to bow on the ground and kiss the ground, because it was pretty hardcore. Wow. And I mean, but that was nothing compared to East Germany. The next year I went to East Germany, the Witten tournament. Well, we went in from Witten, but we went to Leipzig, East Germany, and their after weigh-ins, your after weigh-in meal, they gave you a little plate that had a little bit of sauerkraut and what looked like Spam or salami or something, and a piece of cheese, and that's what you had to eat.
Wow.
And I was like, and then we went around town, and in Russia, at least you could sell your Levi's for 150 rubles, which is black market. It's illegal, but you know, the wrestlers, the people working on the floors, and regular people come knock on your door, change. So we traded a lot of stuff, and some people were rublers. They were buying everything. Wow. You know, ice skates, wrestling shoes, dumbbells, you know, I mean, the camera equipment. I bought a trumpet one time there. I think I gave it to the school at one point, long time ago. But, I mean, there was a lot of stuff to buy.
Yeah.
So, and Matryoshka dolls, some really ornate Matryoshka dolls and lacquer boxes that some of my friends took to New York City and sold for thousands of dollars. Thousands. It's kind of like Cuban cigars. Yeah. Sell them for $1,000. They get them. But it was just amazing that when you went to these types of places that you would come back and you were so grateful that you lived in America. And I've always been very patriotic, and it still kind of ticks me off today when I'm on campus in the morning and people don't stop for the flag salute, and they're just kind of milling around by themselves, you know. But you know, like I say, I was always the first one up. National anthem, I think it pumped me up. I always wanted, that was one of my goals, is to be on the, you know, be an Olympic champion and see the flag raised, play the national anthem. I mean, that was ultimately my goal. But I feel deeply patriotic and thankful that, you know, the Olympic Committee and USA Wrestling, Art Martori from Sunkissed Kids really got us started. Amazing place that we live in. And my first thought when I got back was every American should have to take a trip to Russia or East Germany or some place where, or even China.
Yeah.
I mean, China's kind of nice, but it's not nice because they have a lot of censorship and stuff.
Their government and everything, yeah.
There's a lot of censorship. So, you know, I'm extremely thankful for the freedoms that we do have and that we can speak openly about whatever is on our mind, you know. And, I mean, you got to be grateful. And to represent the United States of America, I don't think there's any greater honor. I mean, other than being a veteran, you know, my brother did, you know, he's 22 years in the Marine Corps. And he's a veteran. So, other than being a soldier, I think a lot of people take it for granted, the privileges that they have, the opportunities they have, and, you know, they just don't see it because they haven't experienced oppression to some extent.
You know, we covered, you know, your journey as being a wrestler, you know, starting from here and at a two-time.
Yes.
Twice you went to the Olympics, right? So as athletes, we wish we could do it forever. You know, we wish we could move. We wish we could wake up, you know, after 2 hours of sleep and just get right back after it. At what point, you know, did you realize, okay, I don't think I could do this again? Maybe, you know, it's time to do the next thing.
You know, when I came back from the '88 Olympics, Zeke Jones, who was, I coached in the NCAA finals at Arizona State, who is now the Arizona State head coach. We'd work out with him every day, me and Rob, and we had our own lightweight group. And when I came back from the Olympics in Seoul, Zeke, you know, started doing this little moniker thing saying, "Oh, old man, you're the old man, you're the old man." Well, I was kind of the old man because I had went through that. And then, you know, it wasn't a few years later, we were on teams together, world teams and world team and Olympic team in '92. I think I got tired. I got tired of the regiment of traveling constantly and preparing constantly. And in '93, we went to the World Team Trials at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and Rob Eider beat me. He made the World Team that year. And I didn't care because I knew he was my next replacement, so somebody that's been with me for 5 years, day in, day out, drilling and lifting, and, you know, and I didn't really care. So, and I also had after I guess August of '92 is when I took the Porterville High School job. So I was still teaching. Yeah, well, I was teaching, and I'd bring guys in here to Porterville, you know, 5 or 6 guys, a couple of high school guys that were really good from Bakersfield, and Squire Bennett, who was ultimately in Phoenix and trained with me for a number of years. And I'd bring Enrique Montiel, came up from San Diego, but I had like 7 guys here at the house, and I would train in the morning, and then I'd go to work, and then they'd come in practice, and we'd train in the afternoon. And I did that for a few weeks, you know, before World Cup, and obviously before the trials and whatnot. And it just became harder to do because I wanted to
physically, emotionally.
Well, I think emotionally more than anything.
You weren't married at that time,
I was not married at that time.
You weren't, okay.
I was 32 years old, just finished my second Olympics, got a job, I wanted to go to work. I wanted to be able to have health care. I wanted to be able to pursue life, wife, family, whatever,
Sure.
and move on. But I was still number one in the U.S.
Yeah.
So I had to go to the trials. So I went to the trials. I ended up number 2. Rob made the team. USA won the world championships that year. And then, I started I was coaching. I had just finished my first season of coaching at Porterville High. Second season comes around in 94, November. Joe Dyson was the assistant principal. And he'd come in there and ride the stationary bike and just kind of watch our practice. And he's like, "Hey, you still got it. You need to do it. You need to go do it again." And I was like, "No, I'm kind of done. I'm just riding out this, portion of the stipend paying off, So I started thinking about it. So he got me thinking about
Got you
it.
thinking.
He got me thinking about it, and I thought, let's see, 96, it's in Atlanta. That's home turf, right?
Yeah.
96 in Atlanta, it's a 100-year anniversary of the Olympic Games.
Wow.
I got to try that. I got to, what am I going to do? Look over, so I didn't want to be one of those guys that has to live vicariously through their kids or look over their shoulder and say, what if?
What if? Exactly.
What if? So I went to nationals that year. I won the nationals. I won the world team trials. I made the world team in 94. I was back on top. And then I started getting old.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I took 9th at the Worlds in 94, which was terrible. We had a terrible World Championships, the whole U.S. team. I think Melvin Douglas won the Worlds. Dave Schultz was 7th, and I was 9th. And maybe Bruce Baumgartner was 3rd. But out of our 10 guys, that's all we had. Normally, we have 2 or 3 world champs in a couple seconds, and we do pretty well. But that was the worst world championships that we had in that decade, most likely. And but it was in Istanbul, and it was, Istanbul, Turkey is a tough place to wrestle. And the next year it was in Atlanta, but I didn't make the team. So at that time I thought, 96, I've got to try it. So 94 finished up, and I thought, all right, if I'm going to do it and not look over my shoulder and have any regrets, I'm going to do it right. So I took a leave of absence, and I took 95, 96 year off, and I moved back to Phoenix, put myself in a training situation where I could adapt, and I found out my knees are bad already. I couldn't run very well because I used to run 3 miles a day, every day. And then sprints on, getting ready to prepare for peaking before competition. But I'd run 3 miles a day, and 2 miles was enough. That was hard enough. So then I started swimming 20 minutes. Run my 2 miles, swim 20 minutes. And so I adjusted my training as my body aged and kind of failed me somewhat, because you do get older. So I ended up going to the trials. I think can't remember if I was 2nd or 3rd in nationals that year. I must have been 3rd because I was 3rd going into the final trials in Spokane, Washington. I ended up 3rd at the Olympic trials. And part of my goal was not only to experience the 100-year anniversary of the Olympics, but also to make sure that Rob Eider would make the team. Because he was also sun-kissed, and we have a long lineage of successful 105-pounders at Sunkist. And so Rob ended up making the team. I ended up 3rd. I got an opportunity to go coach Rob at the Olympics, him and Lou Roselli, who's now at Oklahoma University. Lou dislocated his elbow second match at the Olympics in Atlanta, and that was ugly. That was kind of tragic. So that kind of ended his career. But I think Rob ended up 6th or 7th. But it was a great experience. And it was probably the most fun I've had at the Olympics because I bought all these tickets beforehand. And my high school coach, Drew Williams, him and Brian Scott actually went to Seoul to watch me at the Olympics. My mom got an opportunity to go as well.
Nice.
So I had fans there, that people from Porterville, which was fantastic. And
it wasn't a new experience at that point.
It wasn't new. It wasn't new. But you kind of knew what the Olympics were about. But it was different from the coaching standpoint, that I could actually go to other events.
Right.
And see other things and kind of enjoy the Olympics for what they were as a fan. I mean, I'm still coaching the wrestling part, but, 2 sessions a day and your guys up at certain times. And then there's other days of the Olympics that they're not competing. So, I went and watched boxing. I went and watched team handball. I went and watched girls volleyball. I was going to go watch men's volleyball and track and field, but I gave those tickets away because I kind of had some other things going on. But it was a great experience. Randy Moore went.
Oh, he did.
Nice.
Randy went, and way back in January, he goes, "Well, I got to know where I'm going to stay. I got to know where I'm going to stay," and because they had these rings of circles of places to stay, and the farther out you went, the cheaper it got. So he had to have a place. He wanted to know where he could go. And so he ended up in a real hellhole out in the middle by Marietta, which was about 45 minutes out. And I think Drew and Tina Williams, so my high school coach, they drove back on their motorcycle and they went through Branson and did a whole tour. And they ended up staying together, all three of them, in one little hotel room that was made Motel 6 look good.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty bad. And I said, you should have waited. I could have got you this other room, because I know things fall in place, and I'm kind of a last minute guy as far as planning. I mean, I don't have a problem, if I need a hotel tonight, I don't have a problem booking it right now.
Right now, yeah.
I don't have to do it last month or a month before or last week. I don't have to do that.
Right.
I'm pretty savvy on traveling, so I don't worry about those little things. It'll work out. But he had to have a place, and they ended up at this place way out in the middle of the boondocks, and quite the experience for them.
Oh, that's incredible. I have a question to ask you. So I think I was watching a video. You were explaining to some kids or something, and it was a story about Dave Schultz wrestling a bear in a bar.
I can't remember. I think that was they have an Olympic festival.
Yeah.
It's a competition. It's a national level competition, and it's usually a year after the Olympics, although they've had it the year before. It's kind of like Pan American Games is always before the year before an Olympic year. Well, Olympic Festival is like the sporting event the year after the Olympics, and I think we were in Stillwater, Oklahoma, for the Olympic Festival in 1989. And the Olympic Festival is where the USOC brings all the sports together. So it's like a little mini Olympics for the United States, which is kind of cool because you get to see other sports. It's not just wrestling. So you get to see all the sports, and all the sports come together. And we were in the Olympic Festival in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we were they have a world-famous bar there that's called Eskimo Joe's. Well, at that time, Eskimo Joe's, it's world-renowned, it's still there. There was a place next door called Tumbleweeds, I believe. And, some people came in to the bar, and they said, "Hey, there's a bear over there. They're offering $100 for anybody that can pin the bear." So we went over there, and it's a bear. But anatomically, a bear, you cannot pin his shoulders down.
Yeah.
Okay, you can't do this. You can't do this to a bear. I mean, they go up, I think, this way. But you can't pin a bear. So they were saying you had to pin the bear. Well, this one guy went out there, and he was an Okie for sure, because, he had his overalls on, and he was a big heavyweight guy, and the bear just went, one little single leg, and they had a muzzle on him, so his snout was right over right over the guy's face. Okay, well, he lost. So, and it was kind of intriguing because then Mark Schultz went out there and actually gut-wrenched the bear and rolled him over, and you can hear the bear go, "Arr!" And and he couldn't pin the bear. And then Bruce Baumgartner, our heavyweight, went out there.
Oh, boy.
And he kind of got him on its side, but he didn't really get him on his back, and he had a hard time moving him. Well, Dave, being the genius in wrestling that he is, he has a very good front headlock, and he used to choke people out with it. And but he looked at the guy, had the leash on him, right? So he's like, well, I'm going to move away from the leash side and the guy that's handling him. And he said every time he started to do his front headlock, he could feel the bear's breath breathing on him. And he's like pulled his hand back, so he never really got his front headlock. He got behind him a couple times, but he never really got the headlock. And I think Mark was the one that got him closest to getting pinned, and because his arms weren't straight out, they wouldn't give him the $100. But Mark Schultz probably basically pinned the bear because he had the bear on his back. Dave was there circling the bear and got around it a couple of times, and he was just, a little hesitant about keeping his hand too close to that muzzle. Yeah. And but it was great fun. It was an exciting night for the whole world team is there, and we go out and have cranberry juice and orange juice and just kind of hang out and socialize with people, especially after a competition where you just kind of relax, So it was a entertaining evening.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
I wanted to ask, you're a wrestling coach, and how long have you been a wrestling coach? How many years has it been now?
I don't know.
Been too many?
Well, it kind of depends on when you.
Just high school.
When did I start teaching wrestling?
Let's say high school. Let's just go high school.
High school, 29 years.
So I'm curious to know, with all your experiences and all everything you've gone through personally, through the sport, you obviously have more knowledge than most about it. What is it that you're trying to share now as a coach, as an educator of it?
Well, I think it's certainly a wrestling or any sport's kind of a lifestyle, and you live that lifestyle to be the best.
Right.
And ultimately, if you can share the mental side of it, the nutritional side of it, anything that has to do with athletic, it's probably more than that, because it's kind of an attitude of how you're trying to make good people from the sport.
Right.
Okay. Ultimately, you want people to be a good citizen. You want them to be a productive worker. You want them to love other people or be giving or have some sympathy towards some people that are not as in a good position as you are, or help somebody with a hand up, or even maybe somebody else be able to accept help from other people that are trying to help you up. And ultimately, you're just trying to make good people. And I think in the wrestling world, it's not like other sports, because wrestling is extremely unique in the fact that almost every wrestling person around the globe will give you a hand up. So if you run into somebody, you need a place to stay, you're in town, whatever, we'll take you to dinner. They're very giving. And, I think whether it's a sport or just people on the street, there's not a lot of people there that'll just say, it's kind of what Poland's doing for Ukraine right now, right? They're opening their arms and saying, hey, we don't know you, but come stay with us. We'll take care of you and your family. And it's kind of like that, where the wrestling world is
similar.
Is very similar to that. And it's very, I don't know how unique it is, but it's probably, there's good people all over, obviously.
Right.
And I think half the Poland they're all wrestlers. They're all wrestlers. They have that wrestling mentality that they're going to open their arms and say, hey, we can take care of you for a while. Right. And wherever I travel and I do things and I run into people, I run into wrestlers, It happens all the time.
Yeah.
What advice would you give kids wrestling, wrestlers? And a second question, kind of off that, what advice would you give parents of wrestlers?
For kids, just do your best. Okay? Understand that, number one, regardless of your ability level, you are the best. You're the best you can be right now. And try to do your best all the time. And if that means learning things and getting educated on the sport or listening to a coach or, different people's advice, even your parents' advice sometimes, just welcome it, okay? Become a student of the sport. You've really got to become a student. You don't have to know all the history, but you've got to know something. The other part of that is find people in your sport that you would like to emulate or that best reflects your values right now, and try to emulate the things that they're doing. And like we said, you steal from everybody. So if you can glean some knowledge from whoever it is, heavyweights or doesn't matter, any sport. Any sport.
Just be open-minded.
Yeah, and it's being able to take what others have done successfully and making it your own. As far as parents, number one, let your kids be kids. Expose them to every sport that they want to try. Sometimes, I know parents push kids sometimes, but initially, that may just to be able to get them to understand the life of competition, because life is a competition. It's fun, and find the enjoyment in being a kid at, if you're doing soccer, then you're kicking the soccer ball. Who cares if they take scores, Not everybody's going to get a trophy, though. I mean, that's just reality. So if you don't get a trophy at the end of the year or a medal or whatever, that's okay. Have fun with what you did and kind of learn the skills that you need to learn that are going to help you become a good person. Parents, sometimes, there's more than one dad that I've said, hey, just be a dad. Go up in the stands. You don't need to be here at Matt's side yelling at your kid and the kid's yelling back at you and we're having this argument going on Matt's side. It's like, just go. Okay? Wish them well. Win or lose, give them a pat on the back. Give them a hug when you're done. Let them do their thing.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of parents out there, and through the years, you've seen a lot of it, especially in club and off-season tournaments, that, parents are just right in the kid's face, or parents are fighting other parents, It's
interesting.
Atrocious.
Yeah.
It's atrocious attitude, but I understand every parent wants their kid to be the best. They want them to win. They want them to be successful. But part of that is enabling the kid to have fun with it, If they're able to have fun with it and they really enjoy what they're doing, then obviously they're going to excel at it at some point. And whether they do or not, and that's the thing with high school kids, you don't know if they're going to be good or not.
Yeah.
As a high school coach, whoever comes in the room, that's who you're coaching. I don't get to pick and choose. Okay? Should I? No. That's all right. I'm going to help develop you in this sense that when you leave here, you're going to have attained some knowledge that's going to make you a better person, a better competitor, a better employee, a better citizen, and you're going to be much more well-rounded. And ultimately, in high school level, that's what we're trying to do, is prepare kids for making decisions that are going to affect their life, particularly when they're 18, 19, and 20.
To kind of add on to this topic, you talk about kids just, have fun, do your best and things like that, What would you say to the athlete, though, that wants to reach your level of success? What sacrifices need to be made? What commitment needs to be, pinned down? Like, what advice would you give them, You know, the ones that are just trying to get to the top tier.
Yeah. You know, there's such a process that goes on doing that type of thing, because at some point you're going to realize that this competition means more than other competitions, and you're going to be rewarded more if you win than if you lose.
Right.
And you know, that's our first goal of the season. Any season is to get everybody on the team a victory, because they're going to have losses. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to learn from those mistakes and try to achieve and get a win. So ultimately, you want kids to understand both sides of that.
Right.
What losing's like and what winning's like. And
Right.
get excited for winning. And let's say you're successful and you go on and you continue winning and you continue winning, and then you have a tragic loss.
Time to learn.
Like me, second in state. Yeah. So you have to learn in that moment that you're going to have to do some different things, you know, mentally. I mean, you're going to have to grow with it. And you certainly learn a lot more from a loss than you do a win. A lot of victories you forget. You forget, I won this, or I beat this guy, or beat this guy. But that guy that lost to you, he's probably back there training right now saying, next time I see him, I'm going to, you know.
Do this differently, yeah.
So you end up getting a target on your back. And at some point, you also feel like, yes, this is a lot of work. So it becomes not as fun as it used to be when you were, you know, 7, 8, 10, 12. It's not as fun. And those are milestones or plateaus in your career that you're going to have to find a different gear or a different way of approaching it, so you get your enthusiasm back and your energy back and reestablish your goals. Maybe it's a point where you have to reestablish a different goal or a different direction to achieve the same kind of goal. Yeah, you're going to run into brick walls.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to get around that brick wall? Am I going to go around it? Am I going to go over it? Am I going to dig a hole under it? So you have to make those kinds of adjustments that say, yes, you know, I've been on the road for, 88 days this year already. I'm tired. They lost my luggage at this airport. This is so much work. You know, I'm having to work out, 3 times a day. It's tiring. And mentally, you kind of get run down. But at the same time, you may have ran into a plateau.
Right.
And so you're not at a peak. So you have to make some adjustments to be able to get around that wall or to get under it or over it or find a different way through it. And mentally, that's where the growth really comes from.
Right.
So as you can do that, then you reestablish your goals and you can achieve more. So I think that in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is.
Right.
But you have to reestablish those goals, and you're not always going to let's say you hit, you have 3 goals established, whether I'm gonna win the league, I'm gonna win the Masters, or I'm gonna get on the podium at state, I'm gonna go to the Nationals, whatever it might be. You're going to find obstacles to each one of those, and then you have to figure out how to achieve it. So and that's where coaching and sometimes your teammates even can help you reestablish those goals or look at things a little bit differently so you can excel. You can get through that. You can go through that brick wall or over the brick wall, or, you make a little diversion in your training that is going to help you. And a lot of it is mental. It is mental.
Yeah.
And there's people out there that do mindset training now, which we were doing visualization and all that back in the 80s, and all of a sudden they put a name on it, and it's revolutionary, and they're charging big money for it.
Sure.
So I give it for free for my athletes. It's all free.
It sounds like the takeaway is assess and adapt, right?
Yes.
To continue to grow and reach that level of success, and if you can't do that, then...
Well, it's not that you can't do it. I mean, you're perfectly capable of doing it.
Right.
I think everybody's capable of doing it to some extent, depending on how big the goal is.
Sure.
And the kind of work you're putting into that. But assessing your loss, or assessing even a victory, or assessing a time in the match where you have a mental lapse and that's where you got scored on, and how do I change that little bitty aspect of not having a mental lapse at a minute 30 into the match?
Yeah.
How do I assess that and eliminate it?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it is focus and concentration, and mental training. You got to train your mind to be able to go through that. But and that way you can adapt to when those things do happen. You're prepared for it.
Absolutely.
You've been coaching for almost, nearly 30 years. What's your most proud, or I guess proudest moment or moments in your coaching career?
High school coaching.
Yeah, high school coaching. Proudest moment.
Well, I've been coaching a lot longer than that, but high school coaching, I take great pride in Eddie Ramos being our first state champion, because nobody thought he could do it. He lost to Brandon Fox down at 5 Counties, 2 months before state championship, and he got beat pretty good. I won a steak and lobster dinner on a bet that he was going to beat Brandon Fox in the semis, who was undefeated in state, number 1 guy. Eddie was, maybe 5th or 6th seed, or no, he would have been 4th or 5th seed at that time. And seeing guys achieve, whether it's Eddie Ramos or Joe Soto or Mason Pingili, Shane Yakuta, these guys that have made it to the finals of state, and I mean even AJ Contreras, who made the podium, but he wasn't in the finals or anything. I mean, just placing at state and making the podium and being a state medalist. Tremendous amount of pride in those guys that have done the work, were coachable, listened. Eddie Ramos wasn't very coachable, but he became coachable. But at some point along their career, they become coachable, and they make it a little bit easier. But it's a lot of it's fighting with the athlete to, gain their trust and help them understand that this is the path they need to take. And so it brings me great pride that anybody that's all of our guys that have stepped on the mat, I don't care if he's state champion or he never won a match, just to get out there on the mat and have the courage to get out there at a high school level and compete when it's a one-on-one sport. There's nothing like it.
Yeah. Spotlight's on you.
Yeah, you're in total control, okay? Or you get pounded, But whatever it is, you're in control of. You talk about the mental aspect of it. You're in control of the physical. It's you and another person, your weight, and I think that's the biggest appealing thing in high school wrestling, and it gives me great pride that we've had a number of kids come through our program that have won matches, that understand what the sport is about and how it's building their character and their confidence, their integrity, their focus, and an attitude that they want to achieve more in life.
You're raising good men.
Yes.
That's what you're doing. Yeah.
And women now, too.
And women.
Yeah, we've been doing that for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess, what are your thoughts on, I guess, just a sport of wrestling today, just in general?
In general?
Yeah. Just
it's going places.
Yeah.
So you like the direction that it's going in? Like, as in, like, what do you mean as in the sense of going places? Like more publicity of the sport?
I didn't say that.
Oh.
He said that, going places. I like the opportunity that wrestling gives the individual. I mean, there's a team aspect of it too. When you're in dual meets or you're wrestling league and you have duels, I mean, there's a team aspect of it. Even in a tournament situation, there's a team aspect of it because they keep each individual's points. Right. And the better that each individual does, the better your team does. So there's a team aspect of it. But in order for that to happen, the individual has to achieve and do well.
Right.
So right now, where it's going, girls wrestling is the fastest growing sport in the country. Probably in the world. I don't know. It's pretty big. Soccer's still up there.
Sure.
You know, it's constantly growing because they, you know, year after year. But girls wrestling across the United States is growing. Soon to have more D1 programs. University of Iowa established a Division I wrestling program, which the land of Dan Gable. How can you not start D1 wrestling in the land of Dan Gable, where, you know, it's between Iowa and Oklahoma State, and Oklahoma and Iowa. Those are the two biggest, or historically winningest states through our history. But to start D1 wrestling girls at the University of Iowa and being the first one to do so, I think it brings a lot of notoriety to the women's sports and how it's going to excel. They hired Clarissa Chung, who was a silver, maybe a bronze medalist too at Olympics 2012 maybe, and multiple world placer. So there's a lot of quality women out there. And, you know, it's not ideal the way they did it because it's not really coming up from the grassroots to the top. It's kind of like going from the top down, but it is growing like wildfire. I think we had our first girl wrestler was Christine Ventry in 96 or 97. And she actually represented the varsity at 125 1 year in that January. And I coached her daughter about 3 years ago.
Really?
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Full circle
Really cool.
on that one.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, if you look at MMA or UFC today, and you look at the most champions in their and what they started in or what their like base was, it's wrestling, right? I think it's wrestling's 1, jiu-jitsu's like 2, and then you got some, you know, karate and Muay Thai and some of those.
Well, I think when MMA first started, you know, Gracie's out of Brazil, and jiu-jitsu was number 1 because that's what everybody knew at that time. But when wrestlers started getting into MMA and starting to fight, they were extremely successful. So you saw, even at the high school level here on Porterville campus in, you know, 2008, 2010, you saw an exodus of wrestlers that should have came out for the high school team, but no, they're going to club practice to do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to do MMA. I'm going to do MMA because they're all excited. But at the same time, I guess it was early 2000.
Yeah.
And after that, maybe in 2009, 2010, all those kids from jiu-jitsu understood that they need to have a ground game, and wrestling was the base because a lot of wrestlers were very successful in MMA. So we had an influx, you know, the last decade and a half of people that are coming from jiu-jitsu to learn wrestling, so they could go back into MMA after high school.
Yeah, I mean, you look at all the champions, Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, all these guys they're wrestlers, wrestle in college, you know, at a high level. So it's
all right. Name somebody I know.
Chad Mendez.
Yeah, I know Chad.
Chad Mendez. He was out of Hanford, right?
Yes.
Mendez, Hanford, and then obviously you got Joe here, and then all these guys. So
yeah, Joe Soto beat him.
Yeah. So.
But he ended up losing, and Chad won the state. Dan Severn.
Yeah.
You know that name?
Yeah. That was way back, early 2000s, late 90s? In MMA,
it was
UFC?
about the 90s. You know, I'm trying to think.
96,
because
97,
Rod
probably.
Severn was on the ASU team. Dave Severn was the coach at Phoenix Junior College. Dan wrestled at Michigan, but was down in Phoenix. He was part of Sunkist Kids. He was our 220-pounder. I think I was on the world team with him probably back in 89 or 87, somewhere back then. Because 84 Olympics, him and Matt Gaffari were selling T-shirts, made a whole bunch of money, and he put Team USA on it, a T-shirt, and was selling it to everybody. And they went to Vegas for 5 days.
Wow, that's a lot of T-shirts.
Yeah, that's a lot of T-shirts.
Yeah.
So they were entrepreneurial. But Dan, I know him from way back, and he's probably one of the first ones in the early '80s. And then Randy Couture, obviously he wrestled for Oklahoma State and then went to the service. He went to the service and then went wrestle for Oklahoma State, and then he's phenomenal at MMA.
Dan Henderson.
Dan Henderson was on the Olympic team with me in '92, but he was Greco. I was freestyle. So I see his dad now and then, and I mean, there's a ton of them. There's a ton of them that have all done it. They really, Mark Schultz fought once, I think, in probably after '96, after Dave was killed. Mark fought, and then they started going some weight classes.
Yeah.
Where Townsend Saunders wrestled, Kenny Monday wrestled. I think Kevin Jackson even fought in the cage once. But there's a whole bunch of them, and I was like, man, where was that when I was younger? You know?
Yeah.
I'd like to do that.
Would you?
But yeah. I would have if they would have had weight classes, and now they do. I mean, they normally, it's kind of progressed to a point where it's just not the ultimate heavyweight guy, and there's a lot more opportunity for a lot of people, especially women too, in the cage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just insane. What's her name? Sarah McMahon? Did she fight?
I think Sarah
Sarah
so.
McMahon. She was a fighter, and there's a couple other women that have been.
Well, yeah, and you got just from Visalia, Marianne Renault. She was she's actually from Porterville, and she was
I saw her somewhere.
She got that jiu-jitsu gym in Visalia, but she's she fought. She was ranked in the top 10 for a long time.
MMA is certainly one of those other. It's kind of like, it's wrestling, jiu-jitsu, and kickboxing, and all these types of martial arts that have kind of come together and blended into MMA sport. And it certainly opens up a lot of opportunity for anybody that's been on the wrestling mat or in another martial arts type situation to be successful. Now, I watched a few of them up here at the casino way back when, and Butterbean and some of those guys. Yeah. It was interesting that.
Entertaining. Yeah. It was entertaining.
It was more entertainment at that time, I think, than because they, what are they making $300 a night, for a fight, and then they have to go spend 200 of it to get 8 stitches in their head or whatever, and it wasn't a sound, but that was the path they had to take to ultimately get into where they're at now. And of course, Joe Soto fought for Bellator for a number of years, and quite successful.
Yeah, fought for a title.
Yeah. So it's still there, and I think we may see more those kinds of sports at the forefront. Obviously, they're big now because they're making millions.
You're right.
To talk about the progress and the forefront and all these things, in your opinion, what is something you think that could progress the sport even more? Because you mentioned that the sport is progressing.
As far as wrestling?
Yeah, just the sport of wrestling.
Well, wrestling's hard, because on the international level, they constantly change the rules. Dave Schultz was way back when said, I wish wrestling was like chess. They haven't changed the rules in chess for 2,000 years. And here, wrestling, every time we go through an Olympics, before the next Olympics, we have these rule changes.
Right.
Collegiate, high school, and NC2A, they're pretty steady about not changing as much. But in freestyle and international style, you've got a lot of entities and nations that all want to see something to make wrestling more exciting. Well, if you know wrestling, you kind of understand that it can be really exciting if there's a lot of action. So they try to change the rules to make it more action-packed. And I'm sorry, it's not a car wreck. You're not going to see it.
Sometimes less is more.
Yeah,
you know?
and if you understand wrestling and the strategy and obviously the training and all the things that go into being prepared for a match and just the strategy that it takes to control the center of the mat and not go out of bounds and different techniques. I mean, there's thousands of techniques that go on in each movement. And so when you have two people facing each other, it may not be that exciting to see them push each other around, especially at the heavier weights, because they're trying to gain position of some sort. But ultimately, it's the ultimate hand-to-hand combat.
Right.
And that's why MMA has taken off so much with all these wrestlers being successful, is because they understand how to control their opponent.
Right. Before we kind of start to wind down in this conversation here, who's I guess one person that's had, I guess, the greatest impact on you? Not just in wrestling, but just throughout your career. Or it could be more than one person, I guess.
Well, I've got a lot of people
Yeah.
that Drew Williams, obviously my high school coach. He's the one who started me in the club program. My brothers, Vince and Danny. Vince for getting us into the sport, kind of helped me with my path. Danny for always being a worthy adversary and helping me stay sharp. The people, the city of Porterville, when I was trying to go to the Olympics, raising a lot of funds for me to be able to train and do the things the right way, because we were still amateurs at that time. You can't take money, but at that time they allowed us to set up a trust fund. So people, Dutch Schultz and Joe Reese, who just retired from Bank of Sierra, Bob Bennett, who passed away a number of years ago, at some point, and John Alkire, who initiated all that happening with the Tim Vanni parade and the amusement park, and I wasn't even there.
Yeah.
And I that's probably one of my biggest regrets, not being around to feel all that support. I had left coaching at Cal State Bakersfield, and I went to Switzerland and coached over there. And so I was in Switzerland when all that was going on. But a huge thank you to the city of Porterville and all those people that involved. People at Chevrolet that they did the parade downtown when in the convertible Corvette and all that stuff, and they had the big monster truck out here. And they did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
And raised about $25,000 for me to train that last year before the Olympics, and there was a lot of people involved in that, and eternally grateful for all their support. And it's been pretty incredible how giving, not just for me, but in everything that people do, kids do in this town, whether it's band or baseball or football or whatever, this community is extremely supportive of the youth, and they were very giving during my day when I had the opportunities that I did. And so Art Martori is a huge guy that paid my rent for about 5 years.
Wow.
Okay, he's the head of Sunkist Kids. Sunkist was a club that kind of took over when I was first at Bakersfield, and they took over the Bakersfield Express. So all the guys from Bakersfield Express joined Sunkist. Sunkist went up the West Coast and picked up Stanford athletes, University of Oregon athletes, Washington athletes, and it was a West Coast thing. And then pretty soon it spread to the Midwest with Bill Shear and Jim Shear and guys at Nebraska and John Smith and Kenny Monday and the guys at Oklahoma State. And that became ultimately what Sunkist was, and kind of nationwide. So we got a lot of the best athletes, and Art supported every one of them.
Incredible.
Every one of those. And he'll just tell you, I'm just a farmer. Well, he doesn't tell you he's got half of Phoenix out there that used to be orange groves, and he's developing the houses and the golf courses, and he owns this golf course and that golf course, and his best friend is Jerry Colangelo, who owns the Phoenix Suns, and he won't tell you all that because he doesn't want any of the limelight. he lets Jerry do all that publicity stuff. You want to be out front? Great. Go tell him how great you are. But he doesn't want any of those accolades. He doesn't have a big ego. Phenomenal. I mean, from the early 80s still to this day, supporting athletes through Sunkist Kids. Got the name from the corporation because he used to be a member of the board with Sunkist in L.A. and now they haven't used it since probably early 2000s, 2003 or 4. Now they have a different logo, but it used to be Sunkist Kids and a little orange lime on there and Sunkist Kids, and was huge. I mean, we beat the Russians. Our club beat the Russians the night before the Fiesta Bowl down at Arizona State.
That's cool.
At the time. So I mean,
It's neat.
I mean, it was we had a great club, and he's still very supportive of. He's extremely supportive of women wrestling. In fact, I was probably a fool at the time. In 2002, I got offered the women's national coaching job for the United States. They were just getting ready to start, and they wanted a head coach for women's. And Art said, I didn't go to the interview, but Art said, I'm going to pay you $50,000 a year. And then, obviously whatever stipend they give you, but I'm going to give you $50,000 a year. I'd be a millionaire right now had I taken that job.
Wow.
But this is pre-Joe Soto days. It was before we won anything at Porterville High. Porterville High has never beaten anybody. And then 2005, obviously, we beat Wenatchee, and we started winning league titles after league titles and having success. So I couldn't leave at that time. But I was on the phone with Art, and I said, I can't take it. Tricia Saunders, who's a 4-time world champ, called me begging me to take it. And it's all right, Tricia, I can't do it. I couldn't leave at that time. So it was, but Art's been tremendous, and I've always been loyal to Sunkist. Even when John DuPont tried to recruit me for Foxcatcher, and I went and wrestled a duel with them against the Bulgarians and at Villanova, got the helicopter ride into the farm and all that stuff. I got all of that. And, Dave Schultz said, yeah, John's paying everybody $20,000 a year on top of what you made from, winning nationals or international medalist or placing the World Cup, whatever, on top of that. And I turned John down because I was just too loyal to Art. And Art Motori's done more for USA wrestling as a whole. Not so much the Olympic Committee, but probably also the Olympic Committee, because, he pumps a lot of money into the sport of wrestling. He was an old ASU wrestler, farmer, grew a lot of oranges, just retired about 3 years ago. He had 40,000 acres of soybeans that he sold to his brother. But the whole family's pretty wealthy, so anytime you want to go play Arrowhead Country Club, I can get us on.
I'll have to take you up on that.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, there's he's probably the one person that has attributed to my success more than anybody else. Obviously I've had good workout partners, Joe Gonzalez and Azevedo and Adam Questis and, Squire Bennett and Rob Eider, people that have been with me throughout my career. But from the standpoint of having somebody that's really leading the charge that say, hey, we're going to be the best and you're going to be the best you can be, and giving you those kinds of opportunities is Art Martori.
Nice. Wow. Any final thoughts? Anyone else you want to thank before we kind of wrap this up today?
I could go all day.
I know. Looking for hours.
No, I've been very fortunate to be where I was at Wenatchee High School at the time I was when California wrestling was coming on, and my brother started it, and my brother Danny and I went to state his senior year, my junior year, where I placed sixth, and the things that the community of Porterville does, not just for wrestling, but they do it for all sports and the band and all the things that happen in this community. It's been a tremendous place to live. I know students around here think it's boring, but that's the whole idea, is to set your sights on greater things. Yeah, move away. 18, 19, 20, yeah, move away for a while. And you may find a reason to come back. Maybe you go get an education, or you start a career and you work somewhere else. But I think most people find their way back to Porterville in one way or another.
Absolutely.
But it's good to get that outside perspective. It's kind of like what I was saying earlier. Every U.S. citizen should take a trip to Russia, or some other depressed country and see what they're living like and what kind of opportunities they have. I mean, we're extremely fortunate to be Americans and have the opportunities that we do have. And I mean, there's no greater place of freedom and some of it's kind of gotten a little taken for granted because there's a lot of people that don't want to go to work. They don't want to do a job. They don't want to do anything. And I think that's probably the side effect of having the freedom that we do have, that they've taken it so much for granted that, I don't want a job. I'm just going to live at home. Who's paying the rent?
Right.
So, I mean, there's a lot of probably negatives to that part of it. And I think that's kind of being brought to the forefront through this pandemic that we've had, that people have really taken their freedoms for granted. And we should send them all to Russia. Hey, you don't want a job? You're going to Russia. They got 100% employment.
Yeah, you get a job there.
So, but no, there's a lot of people that I could sit there and list. Tadaki Hata was my corner man from my first world championships all the way through every match I ever had. He's out of Ohio. He was a national champ for Oklahoma State back in the 60s. Was his father's the father of judo in Japan. He wrestled with Bobby Douglas, who was head coach at Arizona State at that time. Bobby's just had his birthday the other day, Saturday actually, yesterday.
Happy birthday, Bobby!
Yeah,
Happy birthday,
same day as my wife's, so that's how I remember. But yeah, Bobby was a great influence on us when I was helping him coach down at Arizona State. And I mean, there's a lot of people that go into one person, and I think ultimately, you talk about giving advice to kids is not only be thankful for the opportunities that you do have, but remember and thank those people and be accepting of that person that's trying to help you. Be accepting of that person that is trying to give you a hand up and give you knowledge, whether it's your sport or it's academics or a tutor or whatever. Be accepting of that so you can grow yourself. And I think that's ultimately the direction everybody needs to go. Not everybody's accepting of that, and they don't want to go there. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Hey, be accepting of it and just challenge yourself to excel a little bit.
Yeah. I told you a little bit before this even started was I do appreciate people like you, you know what I mean, that have gone the distance and reached a level of success that, most may never, reach, to come back to your hometown, teach kids, whether they're at the state level or not, they're just trying to escape something and they're just trying to get on the mat, or whatever the case may be. But I really appreciate people like you, that come back home and do it right. They set an example, a positive example in the community. They help kids. And like we mentioned earlier, you're raising good men or women and boys, so I just wanted to take the time and just say thank you for doing that for our community. I really appreciate that.
Well, thank you for saying so. Yeah. It's been a pleasure to come back and be a big part of these kids' lives and to help them move forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Tim. I think whether you're a wrestler or not, I think kind of growing up, a lot of kids hear your name and hear what you've accomplished. And like Zach said, you know, you've came back and just continue giving back, and kind of sharing your story and sharing the success that you've had. So, you know, it's been incredible just having you on the show today. And, you know, I hope a lot of people listen to this and kind of continue gaining some advice from you. And hopefully we could help, you know, a larger audience, and help get your story out and get all your advice and things out to people. So just continuing that outreach. So
absolutely.
We appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I think it's collective, and I appreciate what you guys do here, because collectively, you know, people need to hear that, and people need, you know, everybody needs to get the word out.
Yeah.
And for kids to be successful, or even adults to be successful, maybe they need to make a change. Maybe they need to pivot a little bit. Maybe they need to reflect and self-evaluate and achieve a different goal. And I think ultimately that's kind of what we're doing. We're trying to live the best lives that we can.
Through adversity.
And support other people. Yeah, and through adversity. I mean, everybody's going to have adversity. I mean, you know, you look at Robert Crace that just passed away, lawyer locally downtown. I coached his son, Alex, and I mean, everybody deals with some of that adversity and loss and
Pain.
I mean, it's terrible pain, and it's it can be daunting, and but you know, you got to continue to pick yourself up and try to move forward and help others be better.
Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. It's just been an incredible conversation. And yeah, Tim Vanni, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.